Will democracy survive the next couple of years?
Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org. Edina Eye Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years now, in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services and dedicated specialists committed to excellence, with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Welcome to Access to Democracy. I'm Bill Raker, host for today's edition of the program. Our guest is Marty Fleischhacker with the Department of Commerce here in Minnesota. Marty is a return guest. He's been with us before, but he has some very interesting and informative things to share with us, so we've invited him back to be a guest today, and I'll let Marty introduce a little bit more about himself. But first, I want to mention that today's program is a two-parter. We're talking about top scams going on right now. And in this two-part program, we'll discuss the top scams on part 1. And in part 2 that will follow on, we're going to be talking about romance scams and money mules. Very interesting topics. So you'll want to make sure to come back in for part 2 of this program. So Marty, let's get right into it. Even though you're a return guest, tell us tell our viewers a little bit about the Department of Commerce and how it serves the consumers here in Minnesota and what your role is. And then we'll get into the top scams going on right now.
All right. Well, thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me back. It's always a good time to talk to you. The Minnesota Department of Commerce is unfortunately one of the best kept secrets, even though we're one of the oldest state agencies, and we have regulatory authority related to at least 22 industries, including insurance companies, claims adjusters, agents, state chartered banking and credit unions, securities, investment advisors. We register them, real estate appraisers, realtors, mortgage companies, title insurers, debt collectors, notaries. I can go on and on. So you get a sense. It's a broad swath of the financial industries in Minnesota. We license thousands, I think hundreds of thousands of individuals and business in these and other industries, and yet we're a relatively small agency. When compared to other agencies, we have about 340, 350 employees, something like that. The Commerce Commissioner is Grace Arnold. She was appointed by Governor Walz in April of this year. Commerce has several divisions, but I want to highlight the Consumer Services Center, or the CSC as we call it at Commerce, and it's where I actually started when I began my career at Commerce. And it's a team of investigators that they answer the phone from 8 to 4:30 every day. They're just fantastic people. They're friendly. They take questions about all of our industries, and if they can't help the caller, then they'll refer them to someone who will. They'll refer them to other state agencies or whoever can help, and they can be reached. I want to plug them, so give their number. It's 651-539-1600. Again, 651-539-1600. And as you mentioned, I've been with Commerce a long time, actually over 22 years now. In my current position, I receive the reports of suspected financial exploitation that financial institutions, when they'll send reports to our department when they suspect one of their clients possibly is being financially exploited by somebody they know or a stranger. And the people who send those reports to our department, there's a law that was written a couple of years ago that allows those reports to be sent to us. Our reports come from broker dealers, financial advisors, banks, and credit unions. And I get the reports from many other people too. The actual reporting form is on our website, and people will Google financial exploitation Minnesota and our form will pop up. And so, like I say, I get a lot of reports sent into me by people from all walks of life, and like the CSC at Commerce, if I can't help them, I try to get them to the report to somebody who can, law enforcement or adult protective services, somebody like that who maybe would have jurisdiction or whatever the issue is. So when we get these reports, they go actually right straight to my mailbox, and our first priority at Commerce, and most of them have to do with scams. Again, whether it's a stranger, somebody they know, or somebody they know or a stranger, then our first priority is to stop the flow of money to whoever it's going to. And, if it's improperly flowing to somebody. The second priority that we have is to get money back if possible. That's extremely rare and difficult. It's always better to try to stop the money from flowing than to try to get it back. And then the third goal that we have is always to identify any perpetrators and get those people to law enforcement, or find out where they're doing their banking, and contact that financial institution if we have a victim in Minnesota, and have a discussion with them, and hopefully they won't allow other victims' money to flow through that person in their account.
Well, thank you, Marty. That's really great and helpful information for our audience to know about the Department of Commerce here in Minnesota. You used a rather sophisticated sounding term, financial exploitation. And you mentioned that you deal with suspected cases of financial exploitation that come into your department. How do you define financial exploitation? And can you give us a few examples of how it occurs so that we could get a better understanding of that term?
Sure. It encompasses, financial exploitation encompasses a broad spectrum of activities. And so it's really, just in the simple terms, it's really anytime a person, whether it's an individual or an entity, illegally or improperly uses the property, income, resources, funds of somebody, according to the law that I operate under. If somebody is 65 years or older, or a vulnerable adult, and vulnerable adult is defined under Minnesota law. So if they fall in one of those two categories and they're being financially exploited, whether the funds are properties, when we look into it, or the reports will often say, the funds or property are being used for the profit or advantage of this third person who is taking the money, okay, and it's not in the best interest of their client. So the person 65 or older, or the vulnerable adult. So that's really what it is. It's improper usage of the property. And again, financial exploitation includes the scams that we commonly think of, but it's many other activities, such as the use of deception, intimidation, or undue influence. Like if you trick somebody into sending you money for taxes or fees to claim a non-existent lottery winning, that's a typical scam. That's financial exploitation. It can be somebody, and I get these reports too, it can be somebody who is breaching their fiduciary duties, such as the misuse of a power of attorney document, or misappropriation or illegal transfer of a victim's property or income. And that could be by a guardian too, or it's really obtaining a senior's property or funds without lawful authority. So if somebody knows that a person has, let's say, diminished capacity, and they don't have the ability to make financial decisions, and you go ahead and deal with that person that has severe cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's, and you get that person to sign over their property or release their funds or use their ATM card. Any of those examples would all be financial exploitation.
Well, financial exploitation sounds like something that we're hoping to help people avoid and not become victim to in our program today. So, having some understanding of that term, let's go right into talking about what are some of the top scams going on right now. And if you can, give us an idea about the amounts of money that are being lost to these scammers.
Sure. So as a fellow fraud fighter, Bill, and you and I've worked together, you know there's an epidemic of scams that's overwhelming us in America. When I talk to bankers and credit unions, they say, Marty, I don't know what's going on. But even just in the last 6 months, it seemed like the amount of scams that the scammers and the amount of victims that these different industries are seeing, it's grown exponentially. And I talk to law enforcement, it's the same thing. And this is particularly affecting older Americans. Mike Marbin, who runs he's a supervisor, he's the director of our Commerce Fraud Bureau, a law enforcement officer. He likes to say, Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes and 10,000 scams. It's not just Minnesota. As you know, scammers are ripping off people all over the country, and it's increasing. And I've seen some estimates as high as about $40 billion lost every year by U.S. victims to scammers. Most scams start with a phone call, and many still do. But increasingly, scams start with an email, a text, a friend request on Facebook, a person who's met on a dating site, or even a stranger's request to play a game like Words with Friends. I think I've had 5 Words with Friends, the place where romance scams started out, 5 of them, Words with Friends in the last 2 months. So, the scammers are getting creative. They're very creative, and everyone should be cautious of any new person that they're communicating with who they've not met face to face. And that's really what I see in these stranger scams, especially romance. So the FBI put out a report earlier this year summarizing elder financial fraud reports that reported to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, otherwise known as IC3, excuse me, in 2020. The top 4 scams affecting Americans 60 years old and older were they call it confidence/romance scam, where they convince you they're somebody they're not. And those are also called advanced fee scams, where they, get you to pay money and then they say they're going to reimburse you, or it's a loan or something like that. So romance scams basically cost Americans, just reported to the FBI, $281 million last year. Business email account or email account compromise is the next thing on their list. Cost Americans $168 million. Tech support, when you're Googling on your computer or using it and a little box pops up that says, hey, you're infected, and you click on that box, it's actually probably going to infect your computer, not warn you, or not. It's not a warning actually of something in your computer. It's a scammer trying to infect your computer. That cost Americans $116 million last year. And then investment fraud, securities, people that reach out to you and say, hey, I've got this line on some cryptocurrency where you can make a ton of money, and they show you spreadsheets and ask you to invest in that. That cost Americans $98 million last year. So remember, again, I mentioned it, but these numbers only reflect what's reported to the IC3, the FBI's website. Overall, much is probably reported to the Federal Trade Commission and local law enforcement, attorney generals, and even people like our department. So that just gives you an idea of the volume of the fraud that's going on out there. And one positive thing in the FBI's report, if you do go online and you look at it, Minnesota was somewhere, in the middle of scam victims. We weren't like California or Florida or New York, where some of these other states have more victims than Minnesota.
Those are fantastic numbers, fantastic in a negative sense, about the millions and millions of dollars that victims are losing to the scammers and the fraudsters. In part 2 of this 2-part program, we're going to talk in depth about the romance scam. So we'll save the good part for that. But one of the things about the tech support, if we could go back to that one a little bit, you mentioned it, and I've experienced this myself. It's usually a pop-up screen or looks like an email maybe that comes up on my computer, and they pretend that they're from Microsoft or Google or some outfit like that, that they're telling you that there's a virus on your computer or that your computer has been infected with malware or some kind of message like that, and they want you to click on a link. Or most likely that's what they want. Some of them even have a phone number that they want you to call. But, we always say, don't click on that link and don't make that call, because Microsoft, Google, and these other providers are not going to send you an alert message that way. And you can, even though it looks like it's from Microsoft, as we always tell our audiences when we're doing fraud presentations, put your arrow, hover the arrow of your mouse over the email that sent you that message or that website. And you'll see it doesn't say Microsoft or Google. It says something or other, sometimes just a jumble of letters and numbers. So we've got to alert people to how to detect those kinds of things. So now that we've identified some of the top scams that are at work right now, Marty, can you share with us, with all of your experience and the cases that you've worked on? I'm sure you have a lot of in-depth perspective on this, but what are some of the attributes or circumstances that make a person a likely target of a fraudster or a scammer?
Sure. And you just touched on the tech scams, Bill. One other twist on that lately is, and then I'll get to some of these, but you're exactly right. That's, it's almost out of control how many people are falling for the tech scams. But the other tech scam that we're seeing right now is the one where it's a tech refund scam. And people say, well, it's a refund. How can that be a scam in any way? And so what they say is, we want to refund your money for you've bought service, and a lot of people can't remember if they paid for service or not, or if their McAfee subscription ran out or whatever. And so they'll tell the person on the phone, sure, I'll take a refund. And then they say, well, give us access, and they have you log into a special program. And what that does is let the scammer take over basically and see anything on your computer. And then what they do is have you log into your bank account, and while they're talking to you, they're actually looking through all your bank accounts, and they try to find an account that has money into it. And then they'll ask you to go ahead and fill out, if they see you have $20,000, they'll say to you, your refund is $200. And they'll say, go ahead and type in $200. And really they have access to your computer. So you type in 200, they put a couple more zeros in, and they say, go ahead and hit it. And they hit it for you. And they say, what are you doing? You just transferred $20,000 of our money into your account, when really it's your account. It's gone from, your home equity line of credit, or it's gone from your savings account. And then they start crying and tell you they're going to lose their job, and they have you run to the bank and get 20,000 to send them back, because the money shows up in your account. But what people don't realize, it's just their money, and then people send the money back to them. So in what they're doing is they're playing on exactly what you asked about. What makes a good scam victim? Well, one is they want to isolate you. They want to keep you away from everybody. But what we find is a lot of these people, especially older Americans, 60 and over Minnesotans, they are from a different era where you're more trusting and you're honest. And when they see this happen, they want to get the money back to the person. They want to run down there to the bank and get it wired back as soon as possible. And so if you're friendly, you're honest, all the things that you would think, make you a wonderful person, that's what the scammers use against you. Okay. And so they might engage you in conversations, and these scammers are very friendly people, very friendly. And so when they find somebody who's isolated, they'll have a discussion with them, and or maybe you're a busy person. That's another trait I see where somebody says, oh, you wouldn't believe it. I was running around. I was trying to check off all the things on my to-do list today. I wasn't paying attention and that email popped up and I thought, well, I'll just click it quickly. And, that's where the harm starts. So don't click on things quickly. And these are all things that the scammers are looking for, isolation, friendly, honest, to engage you. And that's really the isolation is the number one thing we're seeing. And so, those are some of the things. The other thing I'm seeing a lot of is probably more than half of the victims that I'm dealing with now are in outstate Minnesota. They're not in the Twin Cities. They're in outstate Minnesota. So these people who are working these different scams, they're looking for people. Maybe they think they're not as sophisticated in outstate Minnesota. I can tell you, I deal with them. They're very sophisticated and smart people. But the problem is the scammers are just very good at what they do. And the victims that I'm seeing come from all walks of life. Their educational levels are anywhere from, graduate degree to a high school, socioeconomic backgrounds. Really, the scammers go after anyone. And again, they're just good at what they do. And people feel terrible when they fall victim. They feel gullible. They feel, why didn't I ask more questions? Family members are hard on them. But I always try to, if the scammers weren't good at what they do, they wouldn't get paid. It's their full-time job to rip people off. And they, like I say, they are good.
And they're making millions, if not billions of dollars in doing it. We're talking with Marty Fleischhacker with the Department of Commerce here in Minnesota, and we're talking about the top scams that are going on right now. You mentioned a number of things that might contribute to a person being susceptible to being a target. And the scammers like to get to set an emotional stage and get the victim involved emotionally, either through fear or intimidation or maybe even greed. But they're very sophisticated and they work really hard at building a relationship with the victim. We had a guest on our AARP Fraud Watchers group who talked about his parents falling scam to a publisher's clearinghouse that they were involved in for months, 17 months, I think it was, well over a year. Multiple phone calls with this scammer. And what he said was, at the end of each one of the calls, the scammer would always say to his mother or his father, whoever he's talking to, God bless you, take care of yourself. I mean, to an elderly person, that's really heartwarming for the scammer to be working them that way. So, wow, fantastic. So, Marty, as we kind of approach the end of part one of this program, can you share with us what someone should do if they suspect that they might be about to be a victim of a scam or fraud? What should they do? How can you or the Department of Commerce help them?
So the first thing that I tell people is slow down, because the scammers, they want you to act urgently without talking to anyone. Sometimes they'll stay on the phone the whole time when they're asking you to go to the bank. And so slow down. Nobody's going to arrest you. Nobody's going to do anything that urgently, and talk to somebody, whether it's law enforcement. We find, and I know you've seen these statistics too, Bill, because we've talked about it, but it's somewhere between 1 in 6 and 1 in 44 people actually report fraud. And so, step back, talk to somebody, and have a discussion about what's going on. That's really the first thing that I would say. And then if you report it to somebody like me, you can have a confidential, and that's one thing. When banks report things to me, I'm talking to people who are mostly isolated. They don't have family, they don't have a good social circle of friends, or they've been isolated by the scammer. And so I give them the opportunity to talk to somebody confidentially. And then we go ahead and, talk about what's going on. And hopefully I can convince them, if it is a scam, or do enough research that I can convince them that it's a scam. So, again, talk to somebody. That's the best thing that I can say, and slow down.
Thank you, Marty. We'll pick that up again in part two. As I mentioned earlier, this is a two-part program. We've just concluded part one in the first half. But here's a teaser. In part two of this interview, we'll be talking about romance scams, the number one scam in the amount of money lost by victims, and about money mules, that's how scammers move the money about. So be sure to tune in for part two of Marty Fleischhacker talking about romance scams and money mules. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Bill.